I never expected to find myself in this situation. When I moved in with Tyler, I thought I was just getting a roommate, someone to split the rent with, share casual conversations, maybe grab a beer with on weekends. What I didn't expect was this constant, suffocating tension, the way he moved, the way he looked at me, the way my body reacted against my better judgment. Tyler was everything I wasn't. A construction worker with broad shoulders, arms carved from years of lifting, and a confidence that made everything he did seem effortless. He'd come home from work, sweat clinging to his skin, muscles taut under dirt-streaked shirts, and act like nothing was out of the ordinary. But it was. Because I wanted him. And I wasn't supposed to. I had Jake, my boyfriend of 3 years. The man who sent me good morning texts and FaceTimed me before bed. The man who had been patient with the distance when I moved for work. The man who loved me, despite the fact that, right now, my thoughts were consumed by someone else. Someone I lived with. It started subtly, maybe too subtly for me to realize it was a problem. Tyler was naturally touchy, always throwing an arm over my shoulders or playfully grabbing my wrist when making a point. I told myself that was just his way, that I was overanalyzing. But it got harder to ignore when he started lingering. Like tonight. Tyler slammed the door shut behind him, letting out a deep exhale. "Fucking brutal today," he muttered, peeling his sweaty shirt over his head in one swift motion. I didn't mean to stare. But Jesus. His abs glistened, skin flushed from exertion, a deep V disappearing into his low-slung jeans. He stretched, muscles flexing in ways I shouldn't have been noticing. I swallowed hard and forced my gaze to the TV. Rough shift. Brutal. He flopped onto the couch beside me, head rolling back, exhaling heavily. His thigh pressed against mine, firm, warm. Feel like my whole body's wrecked. I tried to keep my voice steady. You should take a hot shower. His head lolled to the side, a slow smirk curving his lips. Or you could rub my shoulders. I laughed, too forced, too nervous. Not happening. Coward, he teased, nudging me. I nudged him back, a harmless, stupid move. But then he grabbed my wrist. Just for a second. Just long enough for my breath to hitch. His fingers were rough, calloused, sure. I pulled away before I did something I'd regret. Tyler didn't comment, just chuckled under his breath before stretching his arms over the back of the couch. Suit yourself. I should have left. I should have stood up, texted Jake, done something to remind myself of the life I was supposed to be living. Instead, I stayed. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. It didn't work. Every time Tyler walked around shirtless, I felt my pulse spike. Every time he grabbed a beer and leaned against the counter, watching me with that unreadable smirk, I felt heat creep up my spine. It didn't help that he knew. I caught him watching me watch him. The way his lips curved slightly when he stretched in front of me, the way he let his fingers brush against mine when handing me something. He was testing me. And I was failing. One night, I found myself scrolling through old pictures of Jake and me. Laughing, kissing, wrapped up in each other's arms. It should have grounded me. It should have reminded me why this thing with Tyler, this stupid, reckless tension, wasn't real. But then the door opened. Tyler walked in, fresh from the shower, towel slung low on his hip. I locked my phone and looked up at him. Mist clung to his skin, his hair damp, droplets sliding down his chest. He walked toward the fridge like nothing was out of the ordinary, like he wasn't standing there almost naked, like he wasn't driving me insane. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms. "Do you always walk around like that?" He shot me a grin. "Like what?" "You know what." He grabbed a water bottle, twisting off the cap. "Does it bother you?" "Yes." "God, yes." I forced a laugh. "I'm just saying, I don't do this to you." He leaned against the counter, taking a slow sip, watching me over the rim of his bottle. "Maybe you should." I froze. The air between us thickened, something unsaid crackling in the silence. I should have made a joke, brushed it off, done something to steer this conversation back to safe territory. But Tyler knew exactly what he was doing, and I was out of excuses. I stood up too fast. "I'm going to bed." Tyler didn't stop me, but as I passed him, he murmured, low and amused, "Sweet dreams." I barely slept, because the dreams? They were anything but sweet. It happened on a night when the rain came down in thick sheets, hammering against the windows like a warning I refused to hear. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, my fingers hovering over Jake's contact. I should have called him. I should have reminded myself that I belonged to him. But then the front door burst open. Tyler stepped inside, dripping wet, his white tank clinging to his skin like a second layer. His jeans were soaked, hugging every defined muscle in his thighs. He ran a hand through his drenched hair, sending drops scattering across the hardwood. "Shit," he muttered, kicking off his boots. I swallowed hard, forcing my eyes back to my phone. "Don't look. Don't react." But then he pulled his shirt over his head. Water slid down his chest in slow, lazy trails. His muscles flexed as he tossed the fabric aside, standing there like he wasn't completely undoing me. "You're staring," Tyler said, voice dripping with amusement. I blinked. "You're half naked and dripping all over the floor." He smirked. "Not my fault you're distracted." I forced a dry laugh, trying to keep the moment light. "You're leaving a puddle, dude." Tyler just shrugged. "Towels in my room. You could grab it for me." I scoffed. "You have 2 legs. And you have 2 hands." His smirk deepened. "Come on. Do me a favor." It was stupid, just a towel. A small act. But when I walked into his room, I felt like I was stepping over a threshold I wasn't ready for. I grabbed the towel from the chair and turned back toward the door, only to find Tyler standing there. Still shirtless. Still soaked. Too close. I swallowed hard. "Here." I meant to toss it to him. Really, I did. But he reached for it at the same time I did, and suddenly his fingers were brushing mine, his touch deliberate. A slow breath left my lips. Tyler's eyes darkened, locking onto mine. "You're tense." I let out a forced chuckle. "Yeah, well, maybe if my roommate wasn't always half-naked." "You like it." His voice was low, knowing. I froze. Tyler took a step forward. No hesitation. No doubt. I stepped back, instinct, panic, but there was nowhere to go. My spine hit the doorframe, my pulse hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. His hand came up, slow, steady, and trailed the side of my neck, his thumb brushing just below my jaw. I shivered. "You've been fighting it," he murmured, his voice almost a purr. "I see it. Every time I walk past you. Every time you look at me and pretend you're not." My breathing was uneven. "Tyler." He tilted his head, his lips so close. "Tell me to stop." I should have. I should have shoved him away, walked out, called Jake and reminded myself that I belonged to someone else. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the second his lips brushed mine, something inside me snapped. The first betrayal. It was slow at first. Testing. His lips ghosting over mine, teasing, waiting for me to decide. Then I caved. I grabbed his jaw, pulled him in, and kissed him like I'd wanted to for weeks. He growled against my mouth, his hands finding my waist, gripping me tight as he backed me into the wall. His body was hot, damp from the rain, muscles solid against mine. I gasped as his tongue slid against mine, the taste of desire, sweat, sin. This was wrong. And I wanted more. His hands slid under my shirt, rough palms skating over my ribs. He pressed against me, and I felt everything, his heat, his strength, the unmistakable hardness against my thigh. My head spun. My stomach twisted. Jake. The name slammed into my mind like a brick, and suddenly I was drowning in guilt. I broke the kiss, panting. I can't." Tyler's hands tightened on my hips, eyes burning into mine. "You already did." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to catch my breath. This can't happen." His fingers traced my waist, his breath fanning against my cheek. "So stop me." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because I didn't want him to stop. And we both knew it. I fled. I shoved past him, out of his room, into my own, slamming the door behind me like it could erase what had just happened. I stood there, chest heaving, hands shaking. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Jake. My stomach twisted as I picked it up. His message was simple. I miss you. I clenched my jaw, shame rolling through me like a wave. I typed back, I miss you too. Lie. Because in that moment, the only thing I could think about was the taste of Tyler's lip. I told myself the kiss was a mistake. That I'd been weak. That it was a moment of stupidity brought on by tension and Tyler's relentless, knowing smirks. But if it was a mistake, why did I keep thinking about it? Days passed. I avoided Tyler as best as I could in a shared apartment. I kept my conversations with Jake short, guilt thickening in my throat every time he told me he loved me. But avoidance wasn't enough. Not when Tyler refused to pretend it hadn't happened. Not when I didn't want to pretend either. I felt it in the way he looked at me, a hunter circling wounded prey. And I hated how much I wanted to be caught. The night that changed everything. It was a Friday night, and I should have been on a call with Jake. Instead, I was in the kitchen, nursing a beer while Tyler leaned against the counter, watching me. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The air between us was thick, too charged. I cleared my throat. Going out tonight? Tyler shrugged. Depends. On what? His lips curled. On whether you stop running. I exhaled sharply, gripping the bottle tighter. I told you, that night was a mistake. He hummed, stepping closer. Then why haven't you stopped thinking about it? I didn't answer. Because I couldn't. His voice dropped lower. Dangerous. Tempting. Tell me you don't want me. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Tyler's fingers brushed my wrist, slow, teasing. You've already lied to Jake. Why not lie to me too? My stomach twisted. Guilt. Lust. Need. He took the beer from my hand, setting it aside. Then he tilted his head, eyes locking onto mine. Last chance, he murmured. Walk away. I should have. I didn't. The moment I stayed, I knew I was done for. Tyler didn't wait this time. He took. His mouth crashed against mine, hands gripping my waist as he pushed me against the counter. Heat exploded through me, a wildfire consuming what was left of my restraint. I groaned into his mouth, my fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer when I should have been pushing him away. He lifted me onto the counter effortlessly, wedging himself between my legs. His lips traveled down my jaw, my neck, biting, marking, claiming. My head dropped back. Tyler. Shoo. His voice was rough, breathless. You don't want me to stop. I didn't. I never wanted him to stop. Clothes disappeared. Hands explored. Every moan, every gasp, every broken whisper of his name was another nail in the coffin of my relationship. Jake's face tried to creep into my mind, but Tyler was stronger. His touch, his heat, his presence consuming every rational thought. By the time we stumbled into his bedroom, there was nothing left to salvage. I let him ruin me. And I loved every second of it. I woke up tangled in sheets that weren't mine. Tyler's arm draped over my waist, his breath slow and steady against my shoulder. The room smelled like sweat, sex, and regret. My chest tightened. I slid out of bed carefully, grabbing my clothes off the floor. My hands shook as I buttoned my jeans. My phone lay on the nightstand, Jake's name lighting up the screen. 16 missed calls. Panic slammed into me. I grabbed the phone with shaky fingers, stepping out into the hall before answering. Hey, I croaked. Where the hell have you been? Jake's voice was sharp, worried. I've been calling for hours. My mouth went dry. Lying felt impossible with Tyler's scent still on me. My voice cracked. I fell asleep early. Silence. Then Jake sighed. You okay? You sound off. No. I wasn't okay. I was a cheater. A liar. A fucking mess. I forced a laugh. Just tired. Jake let out a breath. I miss you. The words hit harder this time. I had missed him too. Just not enough. I whispered back, I miss you too. Lie. I hung up and stared at the floor. Behind me, Tyler's voice was groggy but amused. You staying, or was this a one-time thing? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. That first time had been reckless, a lapse in judgment fueled by months of temptation. I had convinced myself it was an accident, a one-time sin I could bury. But then it happened again. And again. I'd wake up in Tyler's bed, tangled in sheets that smelled like sweat and guilt, only to go back to my room, shower, and call Jake like nothing was wrong. I had mastered the art of deception. I told Jake I loved him while Tyler's bruises lingered on my skin. I sent Jake good morning texts while Tyler pressed me against the counter, hands roaming under my shirt. I became the person I never thought I'd be. And the worst part, I didn't stop. It was inevitable. Juggling two worlds was exhausting, and Jake, sweet, loyal Jake, wasn't stupid. One night, we were on FaceTime when he frowned. You seem distant. I forced a laugh, but even I heard how fake it sounded. Work's been crazy. Jake studied me through the screen. Is everything okay? You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? I swallowed hard. The right answer was yes. The truth was something I couldn't say. I'm fine, I lied. Jake didn't look convinced, but he let it go. Maybe I should come visit. Panic shot through me. If he came here, he'd know. He'd see it in my eyes, smell it on my skin. I plastered on a smile. I'd love that. Lie. Tyler wasn't making it easier. He wanted more time, more of me. You spend half the night in my bed and half the night texting your boyfriend, he said one evening, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Smug. Confident. Too sure of his place in my life. I stiffened. That's not fair. Tyler raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? I exhaled sharply, rubbing my temples. This wasn't supposed to happen. He smirked, stepping closer. Then why does it keep happening? I had no answer. Tyler's fingers brushed my waist, his voice low. You don't belong to him anymore. The words hit something deep inside me. Because part of me wondered if they were true. The night it all came crashing down wasn't dramatic. It was just one mistake. 1 second of not being careful. Jake called while I was in Tyler's bed. I picked up, breathless, flushed, trying to sound normal. Hey, Jake said softly. I just wanted to hear your voice. Tyler. Reckless, cocky Tyler, leaned in and pressed his lips to my neck. I gasped. Small. Barely audible. But enough. Where are you? Jake asked, his tone shifting. My stomach dropped. Tyler smirked against my skin, whispering, Tell him. I couldn't. So I hung up. Silence filled the room. Tyler pulled back, studying me. You can't have both of us. I knew that. I just didn't know who I was without either of them. Jake didn't call back. Instead, he showed up at my apartment 2 days later. I opened the door, and the second I saw his face, hurt, confusion, the quiet devastation in his eyes, I knew. He knew. I deserve the truth, he said softly. I gripped the doorframe. My chest felt tight, my lungs too small. Jake, He shook his head. Don't lie to me. I couldn't. Not anymore. So I whispered, I'm sorry. And just like that, it was over. Jake nodded slowly, exhaling shakily. I hope he was worth it. Then he turned and walked away. And I didn't stop him. What remains? Tyler never said, I told you so. He just pulled me into his arms that night, kissed my temple, and whispered, it was always going to be us. But as I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. I wasn't sure if I had won or lost. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. And maybe I didn't want to.